Now it's time for Ari Zivotofsky, Dr. Rabbi Ari Zivotofsky, professor at Bar-Ilan University, halachic voyager, travels the world, the inventor of the Masorah dinners, really writing of the OU magazine, always the myths or facts and fictions, so to speak, on Judaism. It's a pleasure to welcome back for the beginning of a three-part series. Dr. Ari, Vakasha, it's all yours.
Okay, maybe it'll be 4-part, 5-part. We'll see how much we get done here. Okay. Because I want to talk about a few different challenges or seemingly conflict between some of our ancient halachas and things that have come up either because of modernity, because of the modern state of Israel, questions that relate to animals. And so, as an introduction, obviously we're going to have to first talk about Tsar Balei Chaim, either 1, 2, 3. We'll see how many lectures on Tsar Balei Chaim. Tsar Balei Chaim is a topic that's thrown around, or a phrase that's thrown around a lot. Whenever you don't like something that's happened with animals, Tsar Balei Chaim. So what I would like to do is learn Tsar Balei Chaim from the sources. See what Chazal have to say about it, see what the poskim say about it, see what the sources are, and discuss some specific cases where the Isser either comes up or doesn't come up. And it's important to keep in mind that really this is the oldest animal welfare code in the world. For most of the world, including Western society, concern for animal welfare just didn't exist. Meaning, even going back 200 years, there was no such things as ASPCA or Anonymous, as we call it here in Israel, or PETA. Organizations that were concerned for animal welfare just didn't exist. And the fact that the Rabbonim got shaylas about Tsar Balei Chaim and paskined about it and wrote about it was really way ahead of their time. Now, Tsar Balei Chaim, as I mentioned, it comes up in lots of areas. And the question is, what's the source for the prohibition? When does it apply and when not? So we're going to see regarding animal welfare laws within halacha, there are two types. There are very specific, narrow laws mandated by the Torah, meaning the Torah gives a specific halacha for a specific case and doesn't wait for the Jewish people to say, there might be a concern of animal welfare, let's invoke Tsar Balei Chaim. But rather, there are specific, narrow laws. And then we're going to see in a minute, then there is very general. Some examples of specific, narrow laws. The Torah tells us, you see somebody's donkey overloaded and the donkey is having trouble, you have an obligation to help out. Shabbos we know is for two reasons. It reminds us, as we say in Kiddush, of Briat HaOlam, and it reminds us of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Well, those are the Aseret Dibros. In addition, the Torah tells us, why do we have Shabbos? Sheshit Yom Taseh Masecha Uvayom Hashvi Tishpot Leman Yenuach Shocho V'Chamorecho V'Yinafesh Ben Amatcha V'Ager. Meaning, an additional purpose of Shabbos is so that your slave, as well as your shor and your chamor, can have a day of rest. This one in Dvarim, very similar to the one we saw in Shmot, that there's a specific obligation to help if you see a donkey or an ox that's falling on the side of the road. It's prohibited to plow with two animals together, two different species together. Various reasons are given in the Meforshim. The Torah obviously doesn't give the reason for the prohibition, but some of the commentators explain, well, if you have a shor, which is very strong, and a chamor, which is weaker, and you're trying to plow with them together, it will be unfair to the chamor. Others say, no, it's unfair to the chamor for a different reason. He sees the shor is always looks like it's eating because it's a ruminant. The chamor is not a ruminant, and the chamor thinks, hey, why is he eating and I'm not getting to eat? So whatever reason, lo tachosh b'shor v'chamor yachdav, a specific prohibition, which the commentaries see in it a reason that has to do with animal suffering. Lo tachsom shor b'disho, when the animal is doing dayish, when it's threshing, you're not allowed to muzzle him. Meaning the shor is helping you in your farm work. While he's helping, you can't muzzle and prevent him from eating. Those are all biblical prohibitions. And then there's a very, very famous rabbinic one, which we're going to spend some time talking about. The Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav Osel Adam Shiochal Kodem Shitin Machal Lebemto. You're not allowed to sit down and eat a meal until you have fed your animal. Shene'amar V'natati esev b'sarcha levemtecha v'hadar, and afterward v'chalta v'savata. So the pasuk tells you that things are going to be good. God's going to bless you, and when He blesses you, you will have food for the animal in the field, and you will eat and be satisfied. And we see that in the verse, first comes the food for the animals. From that, the rabbis learned out that there's an obligation to feed your animal before you sit down and eat. So very, very specific rules, halachot, that relate to Tzar Balei Chaim. Now, why? The last one, if it's a rabbinic, and we'll see in a minute, some people say maybe it's biblical, but most say it's derabanan. Why should there be such a prohibition? Why should you have to first feed your animal and then eat? Well, Rav Kook gives 4 reasons why man should not take precedence when it comes to eating. Rav Kook is known as somebody who's very sensitive to other people as well as sensitive to animals. Just to dispel the misconception, Rav Kook was not a vegetarian. Rav Kook did write about a potential future of vegetarianism, but Rav Kook was not a vegetarian. But nonetheless, he was very sensitive to animal welfare, and he gives 4 explanations why you should feed the animal before you eat. One is, he said, human responsibility. He said it has nothing to do with what today we call animal rights. There's no animal rights. And we'll see in halacha in general, it's that we have obligations. We have obligations towards others. We have obligations towards animals. So human responsibility towards others includes towards animals. And if you have a responsibility towards another, you have to take care of that first before you take care of yourself. Hakar tov to animals that provide our food. For most of history, the animals helped us in the field. The animals helped transport, and the animals provide the food directly in terms of milk, in terms of meat. So you have to have hakar tov. The animal provides you with food. You have to take care of him before you eat. Then he gets a little more mystical. He says the human soul is sustained by not only bread. We also have a spiritual side. Animals have no spiritual backup, and therefore you have to take care of the physical side before you take care of your physical side. And then he says in purely physical terms, animals are superior to man. Animals are stronger. Animals are a physical being, and therefore their food comes before your food. Rav Kook doesn't mention this, but others explain this halacha as that you can't explain to an animal that just wait, I'll be back in half an hour and I'll feed you. He can't understand. Well, the human can understand. The human can know that he could be patient. An animal doesn't understand that the hunger is temporary, and so its suffering is greater. All of these are reasons why one has to first feed the animal. Now, very interesting how once you have this halacha in the Gemara, and it's a very simple, short halacha. We find it in the Gemara in 2 places. The halacha, you have to feed the animal first, the pasuk which you learn it from. From that, you have now a huge edifice that has been built in the halachic literature. Does it apply to all animals? Does it apply to food and drink? Does it apply if you have other humans other than you around? And what I'd like to see is some of these other sources. So the Rambam mentions, the first of the halacha, Vinei Magen Avram, Hevi B'Simen Reish Ayin Aleph, B'Shem Tshuvas Maharam, De Le'echol Kodem Abeim, Hu Issa D'Oraisa, Umashma D'Svirle Du Drosha Gemura. So the Be'er Halacha brings that there are those indeed who say that this is an actual mitzvah d'oraita. The drosha for the pasuk is an actual drosha for lo asmachta. V'lefize poshet dafilu berach hamotzi tzorach lahafsik. If it's a biblical obligation, if you made hamotzi and then you realized that you haven't fed your animal, well, you got to interrupt. You can't eat yet. You have to go out and feed your animal and then come back and eat the bread. He says other authorities don't see it that way. Other authorities understand that it's derabanan, and therefore, if you've washed, then you could eat the bread, take a bite of the bread, and then go feed the animal. What's interesting, the Rambam seems to do a little expanding here. He says, when they ate and they had an eved in the house, they used to make sure the eved, the slave, got to eat some of every food that they ate. And they would feed the eved and the animal, like we saw in the Gemara, before they themselves ate. Now, from the language of the Rambam, it implies that this is not even a derabanan to feed the eved before, to give the eved from every tafshil, just meritorious. But you see, the Rambam seems to have expanded here what we learned in the Gemara, and none of the reasons that we saw over here from Rav Kook would apply to the Avid. Well, not none. Okay, how about drinking? The Gemara only mentioned eating. So the Magen Avraham says that ma'achil behema, you feed your animal. Have tzorchis sidu das litom kodem shite lebehemto. Aval lishtot, when it comes to drinking, adam kodem, the man comes first, and he brings a proof. How do we know it? Well, an example from one of the forefathers or the matriarchs. Kedashkachan berivka, she'ama shtei, begam gamalecha shtei. So Rivka said to Eliezer, I will give you to drink, and then I will give the camels to drink, implying that you're allowed, or maybe you have to give the person to drink before the animal. Okay, and the Taz says, he says you also let it eat a little bit. It's only achila suda. You can't have a full meal, but you're allowed to have a taste. And if you go back to what we saw in the Be'er Halacha, in that case, if you washed, you certainly could take a taste. Okay, now it says here in the Shuthar Tzvi, or Tzvi Pesach Frank, the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim in the 50s and 60s, he says, Baha, the Oslecha Kodim Shochel Behemto, Hashelik Fodo, Bedivra Magen Avram, B'Shem Sefer Chasidim, Shekas Baha, Domer Osle Lod, Lecha Kodim Shochel Behemto, Yesh Chilik Ben Achil Ashtiyah. He too says there's a difference between eating and drinking, and he too learns it out from Rivka, that Rivka gave the Eliezer to drink before the animals. However, he now goes further. He says, V'shol ma'atam, why should I distinguish between eating and drinking? If we have whatever the reason is that you're not allowed to eat before you give the animal, that should apply to drinking as well. And he gives two reasons. He says, I have two reasons why drinking maybe is less of a problem. One, the yesh loma de tsar shel tsama kasha yoter, v'lechem b'tsama enu mechuyev lahakil behema. He says, when a human is thirsty, his suffering is more than his suffering when he's hungry. And therefore, that degree of human need, and we're going to see this is going to come up a lot, that you evaluate the human need versus the animal suffering. And what Tzvi Pesach Frank is saying is that the human need in the case of thirst is greater than the human need in the case of hunger. And therefore, you could eat before you could drink before you give the animal to drink. And then he gives another reason. He said, "Onomati datam hu mishum de ba'achila yishoch sudaso v'yovo lishkoach shebehemto adayin lo'achla." The same thing, and he elaborates by davening, for example, or by other mitzvahs. You can't sit down and have a meal before you do a mitzvah because you might get carried away with the meal, and it'll go on for hours, and you might forget the other mitzvah. You might forget ma'ariv. Here, you might forget that your animal is waiting to be fed. But a drink is very quick. You take a drink, and then you're not going to forget, and you're going to go out and you'll feed your animal. And then I thought fascinating. Rav Moshe Feinstein said, you know what? He said, yes, if it's you versus your animal, the animal comes first. But how about little kids? If you have little kids who can't eat on their own and you have to feed them, you have to feed your little kids before you feed the animal. And if we look back at Rav Kook's reasons, it depends on the reason, but some of them would explain Rav Moshe's Chiddush over here. For example, the animal can't understand that hunger is temporary. Well, that's true as well with the kid. The kid won't understand that you're going to feed him in 10 minutes. And therefore, it could be an human responsibility. You're responsible to feed the kid. You're responsible to feed the animal. Which one comes first? The kid comes first. So Rav Moshe says that again, you versus the animal, you have to feed the animal first. Kid versus animal, you have to feed your kid first. And then what I thought was a fascinating tshuva of the Yavitz, of Yaakov Emden. He was asked, do you have to also feed your cat and dog before you eat? Now this goes back, Rav Yaakov Emden was 1700s, early 1800s. I always thought, Jay, do you have a exact date? And I think he's early 1800s.
Yaakov Emden died in 1776, I believe.
Okay.
Which you should know as an American.
Okay, so Rav Yaakov Emden, 1700s. I always wondered, did Jews have pets back then? Did anybody have pets? Well, it seems Jews had cats and dogs. And he was asked, do you have to feed your cat and your dog before you eat? And what's the question? Well, clearly, when the Gemara was talking about feeding your pets, And when they're talking about that the pets, or the animals, not your pets, that the animals help you with food, they were talking about farm animals. They're talking about cows, about sheep, about donkeys. They weren't talking about pets. And you hear of Yaakov Emden has people with pets. And the animals didn't, or questionnaire, didn't have all of those theories about spiritual and physical. They understood it as a simple quid pro quo. The animal works for you. You have to feed him before you eat. And so the questioner is saying, maybe it's only the animals that work. And the cat and the dog, they're your pet. And Rav Yaakov Emden says, first of all, even if that's going to be your rationale, nah. Cats and dogs, they do a little work for you. What work do they do? They are very, very busy catching mice in your house. It could be 1700s, Northern Europe, a lot of mice running around, and the cats were kept very busy. So indeed, he says, your cat is working for you, you have to pay him. Your pet dog, he does big work for you. He's there, very busy, protecting your house, keeping an eye from wild animals and from robbers. So if, he says, you're wondering, do I have to feed the cat and the dog first because they don't work? They work for you. So anyhow, I think just from this tshuva, a lot of interesting things. First of all, as Professor Chaim Soloveitchik likes to say, you could learn a lot of history by looking at the tshuva literature. Here you could see that Jews in the 1700s, I don't know what percentage, but Jews in the 1700s had pet cats and pet dogs. And I think his logic is very interesting, how you see that he wants to maybe say it's a trade-off. He works, you feed him. And he says, here you see that in his mind, the cat and the dog were not just companions, but they were working for their pay. So he ends up, the end of the tshuva is Shema Mina Behedi, the club, where is it? He says, you don't have to, because they feed themselves. He says, that's his reason for finding, it's not that they don't work, they do work. He says, but the cat, how does it work? By catching achbarim? That's his food. And the dog, he manages to find food on his own, so you don't have to worry. Okay. Then, very interesting, Tiferes Yaakov writes like this. He says, you might think, well, every time I sit down for a meal, I have to go feed my animal, whether it's my cow or whether it's my pet dog. So I want to eat, I have to go feed him. He says, no, it's again only when there's a conflict. If it's his time to eat and my time to eat, I have to give him first. But if it's not his feeding time, I don't have to go out and feed him. I can sit down and eat. It's not that once you become an animal owner, you are now tied to the fact that you can never eat without feeding your animal. What the Tiferes Yaakov says is no, when it's time for the animal to eat, you have to feed him. But otherwise, you could sit down and eat. And then, just like Moshe Feinstein saw when there's a conflict between kid and animal, kid wins, he says, Venira im yesh lo oreach al shuchano, pshita the tzorch litein lo tchila, the gedol achnosas orchem. So again, he says, if we have conflict here, conflict of hachnosas orchem against feeding the animal, in this case, the hachnosas orchem wins, because when you have a conflict of two values, you have to evaluate. And in this case, the Tiferes Yaakov says, hachnosas orchem is a bigger value. Now, I don't know what hachnosas orchem meant then. In other words, our rabbi, our shul, likes to point out, inviting your neighbor for a Shabbos lunch isn't necessarily hachnosas orchem. That's just a social get-together. Hachnosas orchem was you invited in the poor person who was going from shtetl to shtetl. So when he talks about im yesh lo oreach, I don't know if he meant a hungry pauper who showed up and now he gets to eat before the animal, or he means any guest. It could be any guest. I no idea. Okay. I mentioned, I gave a long list at the beginning of some of these very specific mitzvahs. Some of them were things that you could understand there's a Yetzer Hara, and the Torah needs to therefore command that you have to overcome your Yetzer Hara. You see your enemy with his donkey, and his donkey is weighted down. you might think, I'll let him take care of it, or the donkey anyhow is really strong, and I want to walk by. But some things you wonder, is there really a Yetzer Hara? Why does the Torah have to say, Lo tachosh b'shor v'chamo yachdav? Why would you think of doing such a thing? Well, it turns out people actually think of doing such things. Here is a picture from the Library of Congress. These were taken by the American colony. They were here in the late 1800s, early 1900s. This is in the American Library of Congress, a picture from 1890. And you could see, indeed, a local, I guess, Arab here plowing with a shor v'chamor together. And that wasn't the only example. Here you have, again, from the Library of Congress, 1900, here in the land of Israel, plowing with a cow and a camel together. And it gets better. Here we have, again, these were religious people. So they even put a note, plowing with a cow and an ass, and you see that's what they were doing. This is all Library of Congress, pictures from the land of Israel, late 18, early 1900. And I guess if you have only one animal, you're left without a choice. Here you see, again, they're plowing a few animals together. And then over here, about in April 1929, picture was taken by the head of the Scots mission in Tiberias. Again, you see a cow and a donkey. And then there are people who really have no choice. This says a native plowing with his wife and donkey from Palestine. So now the question is, what does halacha say about this? Halacha says in general, any two species are prohibited, but does that include a human? The Mishnah in Kalayim says, "Va'adam mutar im kulam limshoch v'lechosh lanig." So of all the pictures, this one would not have violated the Isser of Lo tachosh b'shor v'chamo yachdav. But you see, obviously, this is something that the Torah had to outlaw if it felt it was Tsar Balei Chaim, because there is a Yetzer Hara for it. They have a native plowing with his wife and donkey in Palestine. I don't know the year. How about Lo tachshom shor b'disho? There, I guess there's a small Yetzer Hara, but how much is the ox going to eat while it's treading on the grain? Well, again, early 20th century Library of Congress, you see that they actually would muzzle the oxen. You might think, okay, that was a long time ago. Here is in Ethiopia in spring 2013. I visited, this is in the northern region of Ethiopia, in Tigray, and here they're actually threshing just like the way our forefathers did it 1,500 and 2,000 years ago. And when you get a close-up look, you could see that they've tied their mouth closed over here. Do you see my mouse? Did you see? And you can see the mouth of all of them is closed. So indeed, it seems that people lo tachsom shor b'disho, there's a Yetzer Hara and people do it. Okay, this is more about lo tachsom shor b'disho. We'll skip some of those. I just want to mention here, what's very interesting is that, again, when you have conflicts of values, that's when you see how to evaluate the strength of each one of them. And when does the Isser apply? Now, we haven't yet gotten to the general prohibition of Tsar Balei Chaim. These are all specific prohibitions, and therefore it's a specific Isser without a reason in the Torah. So when it comes in conflict with another mitzvah or another Isser, Chazal just had to weigh the two, one against the other. So you have the pasuk, Lo tachsom shor b'disho, and then the Mishnah tells us, V'chein para lo tochal b'karshinei hakodesh. The cow is not allowed to eat from karshinim. It's a type of legume that belongs to the Beis HaMikdash. That's hegdish. What's it talking about? Well, the Rambam explains, im dash karshinei hegdish. If you have an animal that's dash, that's doing, I forgot again what it's called, that's going over these karshinim, hare zechayev lachsom et para b'shad disha. So here we have two different values. One is you're not allowed to muzzle the animal, presumably because it's a problem of causing suffering to the animal. It's a problem of Tsar Balei Chaim. On the other hand, produce that belongs to Hegdish, you're not allowed to feed to your animal. And which one wins? Well, the Mishnah ruled that you have to muzzle them. Rambam explains, the pasuk says you can't muzzle him when he's doing dayesh, but it's your dayesh, b'disho, rotzalomar, but dayesh roy low, that's fit for the person to eat. Kloma or for the animal. Kloma the shor shlo tachsom of a b'dayesh hegdish shu asurlo chasom. meaning that there is a conflict of two values. You might say, with a modern concern for animal welfare, okay, he'll eat only a little bit. I realize that he's not allowed to eat from the Hegdish. I'm not allowed to muzzle him in general. And in this case also, I shouldn't muzzle him because the animal will suffer. And what the Mishnah is telling us is that no, it could be in this case, it's a small degree of suffering that the animal has. And therefore, Chazal said, based on a drasha from the Pasuk, that when he's doing dayesh for the produce of the Beis Hamikdash, not only may, but you must muzzle him so that he doesn't eat from that produce. So we see, and we're going to see it again and again, that Tsar Balei Chayim is not an absolute, and it's not across the board for everything. And we'll see that it's, as I mentioned, the earliest animal welfare legislation, and we have to always take into account if it applies or not, if the animal is suffering. But when there are competing values, in particular, we're going to see whether it's a human value, feeding your kid, feeding the guest, drinking and you're suffering, then the human takes precedent. And in this case, we see that the Hegdish, the holy produce, takes precedent. However, sometimes it's a stronger prohibition. A Mishnah in Chulin is talking about the prohibition of slaughtering a animal and its baby on the same day. There's a prohibition of Otoviet Beno. You're not allowed to slaughter the two of them in the same day. Maybe that also is because of Tsar Balei Chayim. Again, there's no reason given in the Torah. Maybe it's to teach a little bit of sensitivity to the person, because even if the animals are in two different places, the mother and the baby are in two different places, there's no tsar to the animal. They don't know that the other one is slaughtered, but there is an insensitivity to the person doing it. If the person knows that the mother and the baby was slaughtered on one day, that's too much of a achzoriot for the Torah to let us do it. In any event, there's a prohibition of otoviet beno, and it has with it, because it's a very specific prohibition, again, it has very specific guidelines. And the Mishnah says, "Hashochet v'nit nabla." If you slaughter, but it didn't come out kosher, it came out in a vela, or hanocher, you just kill it in some other way other than a kosher shchita, patur mishum otoviet beno. You have not violated the prohibition of otoviet beno. That prohibition only applies if you slaughter it kosher. What Rabbi Akiva says, that the Mishnah could have said just patur. The whole parak, the whole chapter there's talking about otoviet beno. There's no reason for it to say patur mishum otoviet beno. You did not violate that prohibition. So he says, diakain, he said you did violate that prohibition. The mishum otoviet beno, the patur. He says, you still did something wrong. Killing the mother and the baby on the same day are a prohibition of Tsar Balei Chayim. You're right. The specific, the narrow prohibition of Oster Vespino, you didn't violate, but you did something wrong. And that's why the Mishnah has to say, you didn't do it over Vespino. Because that's what these Mishnahs are talking about. It's telling you about that specific prohibition. And again here, very interesting, behema makshlelet, a cow, a sheep, an animal that's having trouble getting its fetus out. So the Mishnah says, chotech mu'ubar shemea mutar, and now it tells you if you cut it, you cut from a piece of mutar b'chila. If you cut a piece of the animal inside and then you shecht it, you can eat that piece. But minat chol minat klayot, if you cut from the spleen or the kidneys, you can't eat it. But what's interesting was that Tiferet Yisrael says, if you cut a piece of the fetus in order to help get it out, and it says v'lo hotzia e v'shachatach v'shachar eim, etc. He says the Mishnah says lashon chotech. You can cut up the fetus. Why? The afilu l'chadchila mutar. You're allowed to do that even ab initio. The kashiyesh lo shum tzorach b'davar ein kan mishum tsar balei chayim. V'hachari osa kein la'akel yitzirto la'atzil eim. He says, I have your case of a mother animal that's trying to give birth. The mother is suffering, and the farmer is having trouble. The farmer wants to save the mother. The farmer wants to make it easier on the mother cow. So he has only a few options in front of him. One of them is to cut up the fetus. And what the Mishnah is saying is that you might think that there's a prohibition of Tsar Balei Chayim. So it's saying, no, again, we have these two values, to save the mother, which is a human need, as well as to relieve the pain of the mother, which is another animal's need. and the problem of cutting up the fetus, you're allowed to cut up the fetus. Okay, and I will skip some of these other examples. Okay, one more very, very specific example that would seem to relate to Tsar Balei Chaim is the mitzvah of Shrita. We might say, now Shrita, how does that deal with Tsar Balei Chaim? You're killing the animal. But what the commentaries point out is that part of the reason for the rules of Shrita is to minimize the suffering. Yes, the Torah says you may eat meat, you may slaughter an animal in order to eat the meat, but you have to do it in a way that the Torah tells us minimizes the suffering. It says, oh, this Sefer Chinuch, who always gives reasons for mitzvahs. Why do you slaughter from the neck? Why do you slaughter with a knife that's sharp and smooth? So the animal shouldn't suffer any additional suffering. The Torah has permitted human use of animals, but the Torah has not permitted man to cause pain to animals for no reason. Okay, and then a fascinating Katam Sofer. Katam Sofer follows up on this Sefer Chinuch, and he says, what's the bracha? Tsar Balei Chaim is a prohibition from the Torah, says. What bracha do we make on it? He says the bracha on Tsar Balei Chaim is Asher Kedushanu B'Tzov Tzivanu Al Hashchita. When a shochet makes the bracha on shchita, he is demonstrating that we're doing this mitzvah because there's also a prohibition of Tsar Balei Chaim. So he says there indeed is a bracha on shchita, a bracha on Tsar Balei Chaim. What's the bracha? It's the bracha on shchita. V'nir midvarav, this is from the Ramban. Achar she'hershit brach lenu lechol basar Balei Chaim ratzah shelo nitachzer. The Torah permitted meat, but it wanted to make sure that you don't become cruel to animals or cruel as a person. When a shochet makes that bracha al shchita, it's as if he's saying to have mercy on the animals, on the creatures. So a fascinating thing that the Chatam Sofer sees here, the Rabban really, but the Chatam Sofer follows up and expands on it, that shchita is really an active expression of the prohibition of Tsar Balei Chaim. And now, sort of to conclude the section on the specific, because we saw there are a lot of specific mitzvahs that all seem to relate to Tsar Balei Chaim. When you have a specific mitzvah in the Torah, it comes with its specific guidelines. And like, for example, lo tachsom shor b'disho, you're allowed to do it, or you must do it if it conflicts with Hegdish. So too, the Pri Megadim says, Tam mitzvah zu, eviha Eliyahu Rab b'shem Sefer Chinuch, the rov dam yotzi mitzavar, kadei she'yetze dam. You want the blood to come out fast, first of all, because there's a prohibition of eating blood, and you want the animal to die faster. V'od mishum tsar balei chaim, mucham mikan, the tsar balei chaim doraisa. And then he says, Omnam, this is the Pri Megadim. The Pri Megadim is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, and in his introduction to Shchita, he says, Kfar katvu kulam, she'ein litain tam al shum mitzvah, v'chein chamesh lechot shchita, af shebektsat tzvam nimtzim tam alehem, ein lashkiach alehem. He says, the reasons for each of the specific rules regarding shchita, there may be reasons, and we may try to explain why each of these different rules, but those reasons don't affect the rules. Meaning this today, as I'm sure you're all familiar with, there's a big debate in Europe about permitting shchita, banning shchita. Some countries like Switzerland have banned shchita already for over 100 years. Other countries have been toying with it recently. And there's a lot of scientific research that goes on around shchita. Some groups in New Zealand claim that shchita is painful. Other groups, Professor Levinger did his PhD on this, where he wanted to show that it's minimal pain. And the question always is, if you can come up with a method that's less painful, if you could show I can modify the knife somewhere and make it less painful, would we do such a thing? And the answer is that no, we're concerned with Tsar Balei Chaim, but also the specific narrow rules are not modifiable. If you could show me that there's a better way to transport the animals that minimize their suffering, 100% we would go along with it. We want to minimize the suffering in the entire process. But in the narrow rules that govern Shrita, or that govern Lo Tachsom Shor B'Disho, or that govern plowing with animals together, those rules are not modifiable, even if you could find that there's a way to make it less painful. Okay, just before we get to the general rule, I think it's interesting, there are a few drushes that they try to show again that the rabbis throughout the ages were sensitive to animal suffering. The Pasuk tells us that V'Yakov nasa sukkos aviv and lo bayis l'bnei sukkot. Yaakov Avinu coming back to the land of Israel, he comes to a place called Sukkot, and he built himself a house, and then for his animals, he built Sukkot. And then the Pasuk tells us, Al Kain Kara Shema Makom Sukkot. Why was the place named Sukkot? Because Yaakov built Sukkot for his animals. And the Orach Chaim says, what kind of explanation is that? The Pasuk is saying, Yaakov comes back to the land of Israel. Yaakov built a house, and then Yaakov built Sukkot for his animals. And because he built Sukkot for the animals, we should call it for that. He says, and then he says, he says, this was something novel, that a shepherd should be concerned for the welfare of the sheep. He said, because he did this novel construction of building shelter for his animals, and essentially the Torah wants to emphasize this. The Torah wants to say, yes, this is good. This is something you want to emulate. Yaakov innovated. He showed that you have to have extra sensitivity for your animals. And because of that, the Torah says, we're going to emphasize that to remind us forever after. When you call the name of the place Sukkot, you will remember it's called that because Yaakov had compassion on his cattle, on his animals. And some of the commentaries even saw a concern for the social welfare of the animals. The Torah mandates different kind of korbanot for different situations, and it says in B'los Yemei Tahara, when a woman after childbirth and she has to bring korbanot leben or labat, she has to bring a sheep for an ola and a pigeon or a turtle dove for a chatat. And then if she can't afford the sheep, she brings just 2 pigeons and 2 turtle doves. But the Baal HaTurim says fascinating. He says, well, we'll read it. He says, B'kol makom, every time when the Torah tells us about those 2 birds, pigeon and turtle dove, maktim Torah l'bnei Yonah. It always puts the turtle dove before the pigeon. Chutz mikan. Here in this pasuk, when it's telling you what to bring, it puts the pigeon first. Why? He's only bringing 1 bird. The Imyim say, Yonah lo yikach tor. If he could bring a pigeon, he should not bring a turtle dove. Because according to the Baal HaTurim's understanding, a turtle dove mates for life. And if you're going to now take a single turtle dove and sacrifice it, his mate is going to be lonely, is going to be alone for the rest of her life, his life. He says, therefore, if you have a choice, take a dove, because a dove doesn't mate for life, and therefore it's, even if he was already mated, he'll find somebody else. So what the Baal HaTurim is saying here, now I don't know if this is true, I'm not really sure that they actually mate for life, but the Baal HaTurim is saying that the Torah wanted to express a concern for the social structure of the turtle dove, because the Torah doesn't want you to take one mate of a pair because of concern that then the other one will be lonely for the rest of its life. So again, is it true in terms of the animal behavior? I'm not sure. But what you see is the Baal HaTurim, living 700 years ago, is expressing this sensitivity about an animal's social welfare. So all we've talked about till now were specific narrow laws, but we're also familiar with there's a general provision and a principle. There's the prohibition of Tsar Balei Chaim. It's a general principle that most commentators assume was of biblical origin. We'll get to that in a minute. It includes most pain, psychological, and to most animals. It's debated whether it includes non-shchita killing, meaning if we've said just now that shchita is the most painless method of killing an animal, may I kill an animal some other way? However, this general prohibition is permitted for most human needs. Meaning that if you need to use an animal as a pack animal, the animal probably is not happy with that, but you're yet allowed to use him for a pack animal. If I'm going to lead him straight up and down plowing, he might want to go one side or the other. I'm allowed to plow with him. In other words, Tsar Balachai is permitted for most human needs. There is a component of intent, meaning the reason I'm causing this particular pain or suffering to the animal is relevant if I'm allowed to do it or not. And this general law does not override the specific laws. So we just had a long list of specific laws. Now we're going to have this general law of Tsar Balei. And what's important to keep in mind is, again, what we said near the bottom here, is that it's permitted for most human need. The question is, why? If God wants us to have compassion on animals, if there's a human obligation towards the animal not to cause suffering, why, just because I have a need, can I now cause the animal to suffer? The Gemara says, it's talking about the flood in the time of Noah. It says, and the Gemara then asks, why did God drown out all the animals? Granted, humanity was a disaster. They just weren't doing what God wanted, and therefore God wiped out humanity. But why should God have killed all the animals? What did they do? A person has a son who's engaged, and he prepares a huge wedding feast for him, and then the kid dies. So what does he do? He obviously takes it apart. He takes away the chuppah. He says, he says, if the son isn't there, what do I need all that food for? The whole purpose of creating the animals was to serve man. What do I need them for? And Ramban adds a slightly different twist to it. He says, meaning humanity is the only living being that recognizes God. And therefore humanity is the pinnacle. The other parts of creation, including animals, are there to serve man. And therefore, if there's some human need, and again, we're going to see, it's not any human need, and it's not any type of suffering, but human need can trump Tsar Balei Chaim. And the Ramah brings here, just to summarize, the Ramah brings in Shulchan Aruch Even Ezer, Kol Davar Tzarech L'Refuah O L'Shadvarim. If I need the animal for some sort of medicinal purpose or for anything else, let be mishum isur Tsar Balei Chaim. Okay, and we'll get to that in a few minutes, but just it's worth always remembering this in Shulchan Aruch Even Ezer Siman Hey, because I was always blown away when it must be almost 40 years ago when Rabbi Kellemer, who those of you who know Rabbi Kellemer know that he knows Kol Torah Kulo. He came to us Hempstead, and my brother, the veterinarian, came to Rabbi Kellemer and had a question about cirrus, about neutering animals. And on the spot, Rabbi Kellemer referred him to the Piskei Tshuva in Even Ezer Siman Hey. And we were like just blown away. So that's, now I like to quote that and show, wow, pretend as if I know some Even Ezer. Of course, he knew the Siman before and after. I don't. Okay, so let's skip to these. Okay, we mentioned that it's for human need, even for other animal need. You could sometimes cause an animal to suffer. The Mishnah says, "Ein mialdinas behemoths beyontif avon masadin." You can't help birth. You can't be a midway for an animal on yontif, but you can help out. And what does that mean? The Gemara says, "Omar Rav Shimon ben Gamliel merachmin," meaning Rashi says, "Ma'avin et v'loda aleh." You make the mother have compassion on the baby. He says, "Rachan al behemoth Torah beyontif." Hechi ovid. How do you do that? Amar Abaye, maybe bul shel melech. You bring a lump of salt, umeniach la betocha rechem, and you put it back into her womb. Kedei shetiskat sara v'terachem alav. And Rashi explains, what do? You bring a fistful of salt, and you put it in her womb, and it causes her some pain. And that reminds the mother of the birthing pain, and she remembers, oh, I just had a baby, I'm going to take care of the baby. So according to this Gemara, you're allowed to cause pain to the mother in order for the mother to take care of the baby. So here we have not a human need, but a need for that baby. If the mother animal doesn't take care of the newborn will die. So therefore, because of that need of another animal, the Gemara says you can cause pain to the mother. Okay, where do we get the prohibition of Tsar Balei Chaim? We saw that there are all of these very specific halachas. So one might think, okay, there are a lot of specific halachas. The Torah could just write, V'lo tegrom tsar lebehema. It doesn't. There's no specific prohibition in the Torah of Tsar Balei Chaim. So what happened is, the commentaries, the Gemara, looked and they searched and they tried to find a source for this. So first of all, the Gemara in Bab Metzia and the Ran and Shabbos and Rashi and Ritva all say, you know where it comes from? It comes from the mitzvah of unloading the donkey of your enemy. Just like you have to unload the donkey to relieve him of pain, we learn that anything else that causes pain, you have to avoid. The Meiri says, no. It's from a different one of those specifics. Lo taksom shor b'disho. Just like you can't muzzle him because that causes suffering, it's a generalization. Anything that causes suffering, you can't do. The Rambam and Moreh Nevuchim and a Medrash Hagadol say it's from this coming week's parsha. Oh, I guess for us, this coming week's parsha. You guys in the Chutz La'aretz are a week behind, always behind their Chutz La'aretz. The Malach says, the angel says to Bilam, "V'yomer alav Malach Hashem al ma hikita et atorcha." Why are you hitting your donkey? And the Rambam learns from that the fact that he criticized Bilam for hitting the donkey must mean there was something wrong in what he did. And the Rambam says that's the source of the biblical prohibition of Tsar Balei Chaim. The Chatam Sofer, obviously not happy with any of these previous ones. Remember, the Chatam Sofer is very early 19th century. He says, no, it's from a totally different source. He says there's a mitzvah of imitatio Deo, to imitate God. And he says that we know about God that V'rachamav akol ma'asav. God has mercy on all creations. Just like God has mercy on all creations, we have an obligation to emulate God. Shita Mekubetzet says, none of these really speak to me. He says, how do we know that there's a Isra of Tsar Balei Chaim? He says, it's halach l'Moshe Misinai. There's nothing you can argue about. You don't need a source. It's a halach l'Moshe Misinai. So we see that there are lots of potential Isurim. So I had this list, and then I came across a fascinating thing. When you find a list like this, it means that there's a concept, but that we don't exactly know what the source is. As Rav Meidan said, I just heard this recently, I think it's beautiful. He says, when you hear lots of reasons, you know none of them are the ultimate reason. Rav Meidan said, I know of 9 reasons why we read Megillat Ruth on Shavuos. I can only give you one reason why we read Megillat Esther on Purim. Meaning, he says, I know why we read Megillat Esther on Purim. There's only one reason. It's obvious. He says, why do we read Megillat Ruth? He says, I don't know. There are lots of drashas, there are lots of reasons, but none of them are the ultimate. What's the ultimate reason here for Tsar Balei Chaim? So I found that Rav Osher Weiss says it beautifully. He says like this, Hinei pashut hadava, bil mivad taryag mitzvah shebatorah, shuma al adam lakayim mitzvot rabot. He says, yes, we have taryag mitzvot, 613 listed, very narrow, very specific. He says, but in addition to those 613, it's not enough. He says we have many mitzvahs, sha'af hey minat Torah, that are also biblical in nature. Ela shelo nimnem b'minyan hatayag, they're not included in that tayag, mishum shelo nemru b'loshen tzivoy b'furish. It's not, doesn't say v'lo tigrum tsar lebehema. It doesn't say it in a command. Umikol makom ratzon Hashem shiyasotam. It's the divine will that we should do them. He says there are many other, he says, mitzvahs or concepts that are the divine will. And we learn them out of the Torah. Vishnei drachim, how do you learn it from the Torah? There are 2 ways that we learn ma ratzon Hashem. He says, Yesh l'meidim anu mitoch mitzvahs Torah in yanim v'kavanasam. We can learn it from the mitzvahs. We look at what the mitzvahs are, and they tell us what the divine wish is, the divine desire. Like over here, you look at unloading a donkey, muzzling the ox, and you learn the divine desire of not causing pain. So that's one way. So he brings Tsar Balei Chaim as the example. Sorry, I skipped it. V'yesh l'madnu mitoch mikroy hakodesh never b'loshen sipur dvarim. He says the second source is the stories in the Torah. And that over here, we have a story, for example, about Bilam. The story about Bilam, clearly hitting the donkey was a wrong thing. The story we had with, you have other stories about V'racham avakom asav, about treating animals properly. So we have, he says, two ways of learning the divine will, from other mitzvot and from stories in the Torah. And he says the classic example in his mind of divine will is Tsar Balechayim. He says, there's no specific prohibition, there's no specific command. And it's a biblical isser. He said, Yud Aleph Jochim B'divrei Avosseinu. I found 11 different ways in the Rishonim and Achronim to learn out the prohibition of Tsar Balechayim. So he says that it's divine will. If I may, Jay, I think most of the people here are in Chutz La'aretz. I think another example that Rav Asher Weiss meant to bring is the divine will of living in the land of Israel. Even if it's not a specific one of the Taryag mitzvahs. The Ramban thinks it is, the Rambam doesn't list it, but it's clear from so many mitzvahs, from so many stories, that Ratzon Hashem, in the words of Asher Weiss, it's Ratzon Hashem that the Jewish people live in the land of Israel. So here, Rav Asher Weiss says it's Ratzon Hashem that there is a prohibition of Tsar Balechayim. And he found 11 different drushes. He brings Rashi that's Prika, like I mentioned, the Shita Mukubetz. Anyhow, I'm not going to bring them all. But he brings the Sefer Yom Tshuva. Says, we learn it from V'dibartam, when Moshe was told to talk to the rock. V'dibarta elasela, v'otzeta le'mayim, v'shkita esa eda. You have to feed the people and their animals. So you see they have to take care of that. Anyhow, he brings 11 different sources. What's interesting is the Rambam, as I said, learned it out from the angel criticizing Bilam in this week's Parsha. Bilam is not Jewish, meaning if the Torah is telling us that there's a prohibition of Tsar Balechayim and is teaching us through Bilam, that raises an interesting question, which Torah Ladas brought up. Torah Ladas, written by Rav Matas Blum. He was the first of these weekly Parsha sheets that today have exploded. He unfortunately passed away due to Corona a few weeks ago. He raised, there is a discussion found in various forms concerning whether a Ben Noach is forbidden to cause pain to animals. We often talk about the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. The Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach aren't 7 specific narrow, because as in the sense of the Taryag. Because, for example, among the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach is Avodah Zarah. That's one of the Sheva Mitzvahs. In the Taryag, you could find 20 prohibitions related to Avodah Zarah. Among the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach is Gilei Arayot. You could find among the Taryag probably 50 specific narrow ones that relate to Gilei Arayot. So too, it could be that Tsar Balechayim would fit in with one of those 7, under one of the 7 categories. Particularly according to the opinion in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, that one of the 7 was neutering animals. And in that case, Tsar Balechayim could easily fall under that. He just brings this question of whether there's a prohibition of Tsar Balechayim for a non-Jew. Okay. Although the Gemara debates whether this general prohibition is deraisa d'Rabbanan, according to almost everybody, the Rif, the Rosh, the Rachinuch, the Tur, the Ramah, the Bach, the Gra, the Smadik, the Shulchan, the Aruch Shulchan, as well as it seems from the Gemara itself, Tsar Balechayim is a biblical prohibition. It's not a chumrah, it's not something nice, it's a biblical prohibition that we may not cause unnecessary pain to animals. You'll notice in this long list here, I left the Rambam out because the Rambam Kedarko, he likes to also provide much material for people to study. There have been numerous articles written about the position of the Rambam. If it's deraisa or derabanan, I won't get into it. But there seems to be a stira within the Rambam, whether it's deraisa or derabanan. The question is, if it's a biblical prohibition, is it a biblical prohibition on causing pain to animals, or is there a biblical obligation for me to make sure that animals are not in pain? What's the difference? Well, I certainly can't take my dog and break his leg. That would be a prohibition of Tsar Balechayim. But what if I see a dog with a broken leg suffering in the street? Do I have an obligation to stop and help the dog? Do I have an obligation to pay a veterinary bill in order to help that animal be relieved of his pain? So the Eshel Avram Butak, the 2 Eshel Avram, the Pri Megadim, and this one discusses that. He first wants to say that it doesn't apply anybody else's animal. Applies to animals that you have achrayas on, that are your animals. If I have a dog, I have to make sure that he's not in pain. If I have a cow, I have to make sure that he's not suffering. If my neighbor's animal breaks its leg, I don't have an obligation to take care of it, and certainly if there's a hefker animal. However, he doesn't end so clearly, and that you're going to have to ask your local Orthodox rabbi if you find a dog with a broken leg in the street, whether it's an obligation to pay the veterinary bill. Okay. But again, the Maram Shik also, and he ends L'chein also Shabbat the Tsar Balechaim Le'inyan Behem Tohu Deraita. Your animals, you have a biblical obligation. There is a distinction, the Maram Shik says, between your animal, which you have a bigger obligation towards, and somebody else's animal or a hefker animal. In summary, for this section, and we'll continue the next section next week, is the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. He says, "Asr min haTorah l'tzar kol bal chai." Actively, I can't cause pain to any animal. It doesn't matter mine or somebody else's. But adarabba, the exact opposite. Chayav lahatzil kol bal chai mitzar afilu shel hefker v'afilu shel nachri. He says, I have to prevent suffering, even if it's a hefker animal, even if it's a non-Jewish. Ach im heim mitzar. Now, hold on. Very important. We're going to see the ach in a second. There was one of these Parsha sheets a few years ago, which wanted to make a polemic about a certain issue that was going on here in Israel regarding Tsar Balechaim, and it quoted just these first two lines of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. They skipped quoting the rest. If a person needs them for medicinal purpose, or the shardavar, or to any other need, mutar. You're allowed to use the animal, even to kill them, and we don't worry about their pain. The Torah of V'lechein, and this is quoting from the Ramah that I skipped before, mutar limrot notzot me'avazot chayot. If that's the best way to do it, you could, he says, even take the feathers out of a live goose. Raki says, don't get carried away. The Jewish people are not cruel, and therefore we don't do such things. And we'll get to that a little later, that there's lefnim mishur tzadin in this concept of Tsar Balechaim. But he says, mi'ikar hadin, if you don't have any other feathers, you would even be allowed to do that. So this Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, very important. The first part, it's an absolute. Also to cause Tsar Balechaim, you have to even prevent it if it's hefker or if it's of a non-Jew. And then he gives the but. And it's very important to have both halves. There's an Issa D'Oraisa, but there's also a heter, permission to use animals for human need, again, to weigh and to balance which human needs and what level of suffering, and that we'll have to get to when we see what the different poskim have dealt with when they were asked specific questions. But it's important to quote the whole thing, and again, I said, this group tried quoting only part of it. So next week, I hope to get to the specifics, to get to shilas that have come to the poskim about Tsar Balechaim. If there are any questions, there's some chats. Chats. There's a lot of chats. Oh no.
That's fine. It's not so much.
Okay.
Much. You can take a look. I'll just again reiterate. Okay, a pleasure to see everybody. Invite your friends. Join us this evening. As I mentioned right at the beginning, Rabbi Joel Finkelstein, who was a classmate of mine in Yeshiva University, rabbi in Memphis, Tennessee for many years, will be giving the Parshat Shavua Shir. Tomorrow morning, 9:30, I'll be giving Pirkei Avot Shir. Next week, Adam Mintz finishes his series, so please join us, for our learning. Invite your friends. And Dr. Ari, if you had a chance to look through some questions.
So some of them, I see somebody wrote here about, when I was talking about Shechita, I guess I said that it was less pain. Somebody wrote, if it doesn't cause pain, what do they thrash about? I didn't say it doesn't cause pain. I said, the Torah said we may kill animals for food, and it then gave us a method that is less painful or the least painful. It may cause some pain or suffering. I didn't say it doesn't cause any. So that's correct. And the person, there's no compassionate way to murder someone who doesn't want to die. Maybe, but it's very hard to know the pain and suffering. Maybe we'll get to that next week. The person who wrote a bullet to the head would be quicker. Okay, we're not going to get into Shechita now. That's for another topic. Somebody also did say that some species of doves made for life, according to Google. Again, it may be, What I wanted to learn from that, I just think the important point there is that that the Balaturim was expressing his sensitivity, whether his facts were accurate or not. He thought it's important that the Torah should tell us not to break up a pair that was mated for life. I see Nat Luman wrote about the U.S. humane slaughter law. Indeed, Nat Luman's father was very involved in fighting for legalizing shechita in the United States. And Nat doesn't yet know, but his daughter got an email a few days ago regarding the need for some legal assistance in Europe, which I'm sure she'll be happy for. And let's see, not to have portion of a living animal is one of the 7. Correct, and it could be under that as well. In other words, the Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach includes Eva Min HaChai, and Tsar Balei Chai may be under that as well. Meaning, just because we don't usually think of it as one of the Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, that's because each of them is really a whole category. How do we justify kaparat swinging? That's a very good question. The question is how it's done. Today, it's a lot of the places that are set up are really not set up ideally. And the chickens are left out in the heat, they're left without water, they're left in very crowded conditions. That it was very hard to justify. To justify kaparot would not be hard. Meaning, if I have a chicken and he's my only chicken, and I take him and I swing him, swinging the chicken for 10 seconds over my head is very minimal suffering for that chicken. And if there's a real minhag, and again, the Shulchan Aruch doesn't think there's a minhag of kaparot, the Ramah does think there's a minhag of kaparot. If there's such a minhag, to justify it, if it's done properly, is not so hard. To justify how it's often done today in the streets of, I'm sorry to say, Beit Shemesh or Yerushalayim or Brooklyn, that's very hard to justify. So, and again, because something is done in a certain way, doesn't mean you have to throw out the goal with the method today. Just like there are places where shechita is done terribly, and there are places where shechita is done much better. Because there's a place that doesn't treat the animals properly while they're being transported or brought into the slaughterhouse, doesn't mean that shechita is bad. It means that the what's being done around it. Hopefully we could talk about that next week, or we talk about some of the specifics, and maybe we'll get into shechita as well. Okay, if there are any other questions.
I have a live question.
What?
I have a question. From what I understand, I think in some cases, halachically, if an animal had been sanctified and then it becomes impure, we're told to...
Yeah, machnisin also l'kippah. That's a very hard one. I really...
Maybe if you can explain to other people what that is, just because yeah.
I'm not sure I have a good answer, but machnisin also l'kippah, you put him into a kippah and you feed him bad food until he explodes. Yeah, there are instances, there are 5 instances of what's called chatot tomato, 5 types of korban chatot, where if, let's say, the person had brought an alternate, he lost the sacrifice, and he brings another one, and now what's he going to do with this one? So there are 5 instances where the animal has to just be left to die. And the Gemara says, you machnisin also l'kippah, you put him basically in jail, and you feed him this bad food until he gets so sick and then he dies. I don't really have a nice explanation or justification. I've thought about it. If anybody comes across anybody that discusses it, unfortunately, I have not come across any sources that talk about it and that really explain it well.
Okay, I have one more. I have one more. I think it says with Shiluach HaKen, we go out of our way to say that it's not compassion. Is that?
I can hold on a second, if I may. Marty Lakshin on Tuesday, who's giving a whole series on Tamei Mitzvot, spent a lot of time on that. The Gemara that says if you say Al Kansi por Yagi Rachamecha Meshatkinoto, and he basically showed many disagree with that Mishnah. To put it very simply. Many, I would say most commentaries. Ari, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no. In Shiluach HaKen, there's no one answer I'm going to give. It's exactly, there are 2 streams of thought within the literature. One stream of thought says that the Torah commanded it because it's merciful to take the egg that way. And the other stream of thought is no, it's not merciful at all, but the Torah permitted it in this case. And then under that, you have 2 streams of thought regarding the mitzvah Shiluach HaKen. One says that do it only if you want to take the baby or the egg. There's no mitzvah to go out and do it. There's a mitzvah to take a lulav. There's a mitzvah to eat matzah. There's no mitzvah to put up mezuzah. You put up mezuzah if you have a house. I don't have to go around buying houses to put up mezuzahs. So too, there's no mitzvah to do shiluach kain unless I want to take the egg or the check. There's another school of thought that says no, that shiluach kain is a more Kabbalistic. There's spiritual reasons to it, and one should go out and try to do the mitzvah of shiluach kain if they can. And you read it all the time in the papers. Every few months you read about somebody who, set up a system or went looking for shiluach kain because they wanted to do that mitzvah. So again, within shiluach kain, you have two streams of thought, whether it's merciful or not, and then whether you should do it only when you want it, or whether you should go out and do it.
If I may, I think that second stream of thought is very minor, if I would say that you should do it. And the Chama Leibowitz has her famous thing, ki kare kansipor. If you happen to come across, unlike Bakei Shalom v'Rotfehu, in other words, ki kare, if it happens. So there may be some Kabbalists, I know people do it, but I would think that's a very minor strain in our tradition.
Well, it's gained a lot of traction today. I can tell you from
lots of things that are minor
emails that I get. And there's an entire book on it. Somebody wrote an entire book on shiluach kain. So anyhow, so
all right.
So
okay.
One question about the source about Azov Tazov Imo. If that's going to be the source, then it's clearly referring to someone else's animal. So if the source for Tsar Bali Chaim only refers to your own animal, you can't use that source.
That's a good point. You're saying just like if I'm going to learn from Bilam, I have to learn it applies to non-Jews. If I'm going to learn from that, I have to learn it applies to someone else's animal as well. Except that I could learn from that one. I could say, again, the Torah was teaching me a principle. It was teaching me about not liking suffering of animals. And it gave me an example of an extreme, but not that I learn exactly like that case, that it always applies to other people's animals as well. So I could come up with, but that's a good point. Okay.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Rabbi Ari, a pleasure, and we look forward to seeing you next week. And Shabbat Shalom. I know we have to do some catching up in the Parshiot, but I have to do a lot of catching up for all the Parshiot I've missed in Shul for the last 3 months. So anyways, okay.
Okay.
Be well. Look forward to seeing you this evening if we can make it, and tomorrow morning, and all the best. Be well, be safe, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.